Hello and welcome back to Custode Central. Today we're going to have a short video on understanding the effects of terrain on your game. So I just wanted to cover this because terrain actually affects more than you might think about the game. So it's going to have a pretty significant impact on which units work better for you. And if you're in a position to be able to field different types of units because you have models that you don't always play, etc., you can and maybe should try and account for this, especially in tournament play. So one other thing to touch on is that what units might be working well for other people, or what the conventional wisdom is about certain units being quote unquote the best, might just might not apply to you because the terrain that you're playing on might be vastly different to what other people are playing on. You might have special rules, or they might have special rules, etc. So you need to kind of take all the information that you can and try and apply it to your individual circumstances. So terrain can also benefit shooting armies or melee armies. Obviously, if there's more terrain, if there's more obscuring, if there's more dense, it's going to make shooting harder, and it's going to make getting into melee easier because you get to move up the board and in the early turns without getting blown off the board, basically. Another thing is it's kind of more nuanced. Is when you buy a gun, effectively, you are going to pay more points for the gun if it has a longer range. And if the terrain layout is such that it just doesn't give you very good and long firing lanes, there's no benefit, or there's limited benefit to having lots of long range guns in your army because you won't get to shoot them at long range. You'll be using them at short range. And you may as well kind of take shorter range guns if you have the option. In Custodes, it doesn't matter so much because our unit roster is so limited anyway. But just something to keep in mind. And you should also think about, does it encourage turn one alpha? Now, if you have a board where both players can null deploy, 80, 90, 100% of their army on turn one, um, your turn one alpha ability is pretty limited because even if you move out, they're still going to be obscured, so you don't actually get any shots off on turn one. So in that kind of circumstance, that lets you build quite a big army in terms of its deployment footprint without you having to worry about it so much. And you also don't have to worry so much about being able to reach out and touch somebody on turn one because they can't do it to you either. So it kind of doesn't matter. However, if you play on a board where you can only deploy maybe like 30 or 40% of your army behind obscuring, and the rest of it just has to be out in the open and taking shots on turn one, if you don't go first, then that's something to think about because in those circumstances, if you have to play on a board like that, you want on your side the ability to actually do some damage turn one. And I bring up this point because a lot of the Custodes Codex doesn't have a lot of long range damage. So you'll have like bikes, you can move 14, you can shoot 24. That's pretty far, but sometimes it doesn't reach the back end of the board. So they'll actually end up getting quite a lot of safe deployment space, even though it's in the open, just because you don't have the range. Same thing with your Venatori. They can move 12, they can shoot 18. That's only 30 inches. That doesn't cover the back end of the opponent's deployment zone sometimes. And also, if you move up forward that entire distance, you tend to leave yourself open to a lot of return fire in the next turn. So it may not be something that you want to do. So if you do kind of end up on these boards, it is very nice to have kind of long range firepower that can take advantage of you going first. So you're not in a position where when you go first, you can't do any damage, and when they go first, you just take lots of damage. So it's not always something that you're able to achieve in your list, but definitely something to think about. Talked about the impact of deployment footprint. So yeah, when you make your list and you're happy with it, and you've been playing around in Battlescribe or the Games Workshop app, if that's the way that you roll, and you spend a lot of time tinkering with your list and you come up with a good list and you're happy with it, I would strongly recommend that you practice deploying it on several iterations of your maps or your map pool or your local terrain or your own terrain, just to see how many units can actually hide, and do the units that do want to hide, are they able to regularly hide? And if it turns out that you actually can't, then it's it's kind of annoying, but it's a point where you might want to think about changing your list so that it has a smaller deployment footprint, or think about, can these start in reserve? Do they want to start in reserve? Can they just actually not be hidden, and is it okay, for example? Do you have lots of multi-level ruins in your boards? These kind of encourage flying infantry. From my perspective, it depends on the rules that you use on them. Some people say, if they fly and they can balance on the rune ledges, that's fine. Other places will say, the model bases can overlap only if they're infantry, for example. But the nice thing about this is you're able to stack quite a lot of units inside a multi-level ruin, especially if it doesn't have any windows. And this will effectively increase your deployment space that you're able to use, and it also allows you to get a lot of models and points and effectiveness of your army in one particular point in the map. And this makes it difficult for you to be charged, because if they charge this area, you're now going to be engaging multiple units at once because of your 5-inch vertical, and that can actually discourage you to actually getting charged, for example. You might want to have a think about whether your boards include dense terrain or not. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on whether, how incentivized you are to take a Vexilla Magnifica. And if you have very tall terrain that's obscuring, this can affect true line of sight for 18 plus win models or aircraft. Now, for us, we don't really care about this much. It's just going to be about our Ares. I don't think there's any terrain that's ever going to hide in Ares, but this used to be really relevant before Mortarion got the nerf, so he couldn't be warp timed. But there used to be a lot of tables where there was very tall obscuring and it didn't have any windows, and it was large enough and it was placed in a location in the deployment zone where you actually couldn't get angles to shoot him turn one. And this was very sad. But obviously that's gone now. But it still matters for stuff like knights and very big monsters. So we're about to jump into some kind of specific analysis on some maps and boards, but before we do that, I just want to note I took these screenshots using the Alpha League kind of game state, which has kind of easily identifiable markers for primaries, and this was created for the purposes of stream. Just to make it easy for you to see, and it's going to make it easy for you to see in the pictures. Just want to note that not all of these maps are actually used by Alpha League at all. I've just used it as a visual guide. Although some of the maps are from Alpha League. Another thing to note is that some tournaments will use different terrain rules or gaming groups, etc. And this is also going to impact which units are kind of better on specific boards. So for example, a lot of WTC rules state that you're only touching the terrain if you're on the footprint of the terrain. So what this means is if you're a vehicle and you touch the outside edge of a ruin that has windows, WTC will rule that unless your model has the whole rule and you can get a tiny bit of the hull through the window so that you're kind of overlapping the terrain, you can't just declare yourself as touching. And that kind of doesn't matter. Well, it will cause you to require additional rotation oftentimes, so you can't just sit flush with the wall and declare touching. You're going to have to do some jiggling, or if you've got bigger models, it can be quite problematic. And also for things like dreadnoughts or vehicles. And in other places, they just say if you just declare touching against the outside edge of a ruin, you get light cover, you get to see through the windows if that ruin has windows. Obviously, from the inside, they've got a kind of a footprint for the ruin, and you can overlap the base, and that's no problem. So let's have a look at some sample maps. So this is a sample WTC map. And the comments for it are, the comments are not generally pointed towards WTC maps in general, but just for this specific map here that we've chosen. And I think this is all the missions should be for vital intelligence. So you've got your deployment zone here, and your opponent's got their deployment zone here. And you can see immediately from the board that I think this is an above average level of obscuring terrain. These are lots of ruins, and I've taken the picture at a slight angle so you can kind of see which ones have windows, which ones do not. And you can see there are really big pieces of very tall multi-level ruins that do not have any windows. You've got actually pretty limited lanes of fire that are actually relevant, because you can shoot here and you can shoot here, but they can hide here, they can hide here, they can hide here, they could hide behind the wall. And I think on this sort of map, it doesn't really favor static shooting like the old Imperial Guard parking lot kind of style where you just sit there and shoot. You're going to have to create the angles to get the shots off. And I think on boards like this, there is higher value for indirect fire, so things like Manticores, Hive Guard, Valorous energy cannons from AdMech, heavy weapon squads with mortars, stuff like that. The value of that goes up because trying to get the angles for shots on a board like this will be more difficult, and if you don't need line of sight, makes it much easier. And I think for aircraft, the value of that goes up as well, because if you can't, aircraft can usually get a line of sight to whatever target needs to die because you just fly over everything and you just create the angle you want. Obviously, you've got the downside of you tend to get shot a lot doing that. But if you need to reach it and touch something, you can. I think fast breachable units with combat ability are extremely useful here because it's very easy to move from terrain to terrain, set yourself up for a nice charge to flip an objective. Um, and so obviously for that reason, breachable, something like Vanguard Vets would be amazing on a board like this, like White Scars, etc. I think on a board like this, going first is less important because you've got this piece of terrain, this piece of terrain, and this piece of terrain, and the way that they're oriented versus enemy deployment zones, you can hide a really, really, really big chunk of your army behind all of this and be obscured. And I think unless you're a horde army, you can probably get like 80-90% of your army hidden. So that's pretty good. And so it's not as important as to who goes first. Obviously, there are still advantages to going first because you get to set up for counter charges or set up on objectives if you want, etc. And there's no dense or difficult on it, but there's lots of multi-level runs. So I think most people, if they play in real life tables, they're unlikely to have this much terrain, and they'll just look at this and go, "What is this game?" It's a completely different game, and that's kind of, I suppose it's kind of intentional because some people just play on terrain like this and they view it as standard. So when they talk about 40k, this is the game that they're talking about. And then, you can imagine if you play on tables like this regularly, it's a completely different game to what you're playing on if you don't have, if you have half the amount of terrain, for example. So let's look at another map. This is an old TES52 map. They don't use this anymore because I think there were, I don't know, I'm assuming feedback as to comments on the map pool, etc. But they don't use this anymore. But I thought this is like a good example of something to show as a contrast to the previous one. So these boxes are all obstacles. They're not super high. You've got two kind of craters which provide difficult and light cover, but otherwise there's no dents on the table. And you can see from here that all of the objectives are actually effectively fully exposed. Obviously you can't shoot all parts of this objective from here, but if you move just to the middle of the board, you can actually see every single objective, and there's nowhere to hold the objective while being obscured. Similarly, if you land here, you've got lines of sight all the way down. There's no obscuring. There's a bit of light cover they could grab, but otherwise you've just got complete lanes of fire. So this is what I'd call like a shooting gallery map if you can get to the right locations. And on a map like this, what you're really incentivized to take is really durable obsec. So stuff like shield guard here would be amazing because effectively to hold an objective, you're just going to have to sit in the open and take shots. Like there's nowhere to hide effectively. There's also no multi-level ruins. There's a bit of light in the craters, but doesn't really count. But on the plus side, you can hide a decent amount of your army on turn one because you've got this obscuring, you've got this obscuring, and you've got kind of this little crater. And the fact that you've got two obscuring, but they're oriented in a pretty favorable way, deployment to deployment, means you can hide a decent chunk of your army here. Let's look at another map. This is from the Northern Front. You can see here we've got less kind of pieces of obscuring, but they're placed in an interesting way on the objectives. And what you'll note is that basically there's only 8 pieces of obscuring on this map, but every single objective has got an obscuring piece of terrain. And well, I mean, the ones right in the middle, you could argue it's a bit tricky, but effectively, you can hide a tiny person slightly in the terrain, so at least you can get some cover. If you get a very small model, sometimes it's going to be difficult to get true line of sight if they're right in the corner. But the way that the terrain is set up in relation to this and the other sides is it makes it quite interesting, and you're not going to be able to just shoot down this entire line. It's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to create angles for shots. So yes, again, I think because of all these ruins, it favors quite a lot, fast breachable units with combat ability because, they're not going to be able to fight Overwatch against you because they'll just charge you through the terrain. So you can't even do your Overwatch because you need line of sight. And you should be able to set up some charges to flip objectives, etc. I think this has a decent go first advantage if you go first, because you can deploy a fair amount of your army behind obscuring. I'd say like maybe 50-60% if you decide to use this. Just keep in mind if you do deploy it all the way back here, unless it's got very long range shooting and it's indirect, you're unlikely to want to stay here unless it's just for screening purposes because you don't have good lanes of fire really. You have a few, but usually you want to be moving up the board to pressure the midfield. So on a board like this, you do have some dents, which is helpful. But for example, this dense doesn't really help you because they can just move out and touch it, and then they don't take the penalty for it. And you as the green player coming here, this is like a huge area of no man's land where you're just going to get shot to pieces. And similarly here for the red side. So yeah, so for example here, this is going to be one of these maps where it's beneficial to go first, and if you do go first, you're going to want to have some long range shooting, because if you don't go first, you're going to get shot by long range shooting. So you want to make sure that you're able to return the favor when you actually go first. So this is an actual this is an actual map from Alpha League. I play in these tournaments from time to time. I quite like these maps. So here you can see we've got good amount of deployment space. You've got a small area here where it's very difficult to get line of sight from the red player. Obviously this is great, and obviously this is great. This is a little bit far back, but if you just want to protect yourself turn one, and the units that are here are eventually going to come here and hold the objective, that's absolutely fine. You've got places that you can move to. Some of the midboard, when you're moving up, can be a bit sketchy, but that's kind of fine and balanced for me. You don't always want to prevent all lines of sight, because then shooting armies just get completely rolled over. They have no kind of turn for them to inflict most of their damage. But you are able to cut lines of sight typically. So here, yeah, you've got some shooting lanes. So if you set up a firing base here, you can cover most of this objective. But there are blind spots here. You can cover most of this objective from here as well. But there are blind sites here. And I think things like this make the map very interesting. So yeah, the middle of the board is a bit difficult to navigate with the way that these L ruins are aligned. If they were aligned in a different way, it'd be much easier to move up the board. But again, this would be probably too penalizing towards shooting armies. No, a thing to note is there's no dense, there's no difficult here. I don't mind that so much because there's kind of enough terrain that it doesn't matter. But obviously having difficult and dense on the map makes it more interesting sometimes. So I actually really quite like this map design. I think this is pretty balanced for actually shooting and melee armies. So maybe you play on boards like this all the time, and you're pretty happy with everything. This is another league. This is another board from Alpha League, and it's just basically a different tournament table. And it's the same mission, but it's a different table. So you've got a different layout. So here you've got 2 L pieces and some dents. Now, this actually has significantly less deployment space than the other side, because you have a tiny triangle here behind this L ruin. Otherwise, you can get shot from here turn 1. And similarly from here, if you venture out, this side is pretty good place to hide out, but obviously you're not going to be able to hold most of your army here. On the plus side, they have given you some dents, so if you can't fit your army, you can stick it into the dents for a bit of survivability, but obviously you're going to take the movement penalty. There is more dents than you see on most maps with 4 kind of pieces. Having 1 in the deployment zone is kind of nice. I think it'd be nicer if it was further up than in the back, but that's whatever. And this dents is, it's nice to have dents. It allows you to move from this wall to here, and so that you have some survivability against shots as you're moving up towards these objectives. But in general, this is kind of a shooting gallery, because if you can get to this objective, for example, and you touch the terrain, you can see all of this, you can see almost all of this, and you can see a decent chunk of this, minus the stuff that's actually obscured behind this wall. So here, again, you're incentivized to take long-range shooting that can punish people turn 1, and you're incentivized to take durable OBSEC. So yeah, this is a shooting army's dream, basically. So why did I show you a bunch of tables, basically, other than to comment on some maps that you may or may not play on? And the reason why I did it is I wanted you to try and identify which table most resembles your typical board that you actually play on, so that you can understand what unit types your board is favorable for. So whether it's favorable for shooting armies, or fast melee armies, or lots of short range but mobile, or long range shooting and mobile, something like that. And to understand when tables are favorable for lists going first, and when it matters less, and whether you should construct your list to be able to go, to inflict quite a lot of damage turn 1 if you go first as well or not. And how much, and to think about the size of your deployment footprint of the list that you want to run, especially if you're thinking about going to a tournament. they will typically give you a map pool and a mission pool in advance, so you can have a look at, how does this apply in certain maps, etc. How good is it? How bad is it to go first, second? And the final point I think is just to note that copying a list from the internet as to what won a tournament, etc., doesn't always work, because your terrain and their terrain might be very difficult. There might be very significant reasons as to why they've constructed a list in a certain way and why it might not work on your terrain, and they also might just be having a different rule set. Obviously, player skill is a factor as to why you may not be able to replicate kind of John Lennon's performance with Tau. But that's not really relevant for the video. I just wanted to kind of open your mind as to the significance of terrain in your games. Anyways, bit of a short one from me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you liked the video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.